No.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Housing and Communities Committee of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and the press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Combined Authorities website. Owing to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings England and Wales Regulations 2020. To members of the public, if you do not want to be identifiable, please choose a pseudonym. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Combined Authorities website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted, except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or to make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of your screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. As with all relatively new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there's always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I'd ask for your patience if we do. And I would remind all members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. Moving on to the agenda, and we do welcome, by the way, the Mayor James Palmer to this meeting, and he's always welcome to join our committee meetings, and if he wishes to make a comment at a certain point, he will of course be most welcome to do so. Part one of our meeting today, governance items. I will start, if I may, by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. So if you would please confirm your presence. Councillor Steve Allen.
In attendance.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Present.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
Present.
Councillor Roger Hickford.
Present.
Councillor Mike Sargent.
Present.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Chris Bowden. And for the record, Councillor James Palmer, not Councillor, no longer a Councillor, Mayor James Palmer is also present. And I take it that the Democratic Services Officer has no apologies for absence to report.
No apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest, please? Please do click the raised hand function on the right of your screen if you do wish to declare an interest. I see no raised hands. If at any stage during the course of the meeting it occurs to you that you do have an interest which should be declared, would you please do so immediately as soon as it occurs to you? Thank you very much indeed. Move on to agenda item 1.2, which is on pages 5 to 16 of your pack, which are the minutes of the Housing and Communities Committee meeting, which took place on the 22nd of June 2020. I will start off by asking for accuracy of the minutes, and then we will move on to matters arising, of which there are, I believe, quite a few. But before getting into asking any members about accuracy, one item which appears, which is in minute 81, did request officers to consider highlighting in the minutes the comments which were made by individual members. We were told that officers would look at this, and our action log shows that's in progress. Have officers got any comment to make about the way in which our minutes are recorded, specifically recording the specific comments made by committee members?
Thank you, Chair. I've spoken to the monitoring officer today in relation to this point. The monitoring officer has instructed me to advise the committee that, and yourself, Chair, that he'll be speaking with Democratic Services later on as a priority, and will be writing to you personally, Chair, on this point.
Thank you very much indeed, David. That's much appreciated. Matters for the accuracy of the minutes. Councillor Smith, Bridget.
Sorry, can I just go back to that point you're raising, just for clarity, please? So
Please.
the last time I requested that any comments made by board members were attributable to those board members. That's what you're referring to, is it?
Well,
And if
well
I've
you
really
you actually made the request that any comments made by you be attributable to you, and I agreed at the last meeting that we'll do that for everyone at that meeting as a special one-off, waiting to get advice from officers about what should happen, because this should be consistent on a CPCA basis. We've now been told that we'll find out at some stage after this meeting what the attitude of officers will be. So my feeling is that we carry on recording things at this meeting the way we did at the last meeting until we are given instruction to the contrary, if that's acceptable to members of the board.
So that's fine by me, because I was going to say, actually, to me, when I read back on minutes, it's highly relevant who made different comments. You know, that it adds value to me when I'm reading minutes. So I was going to request that we do continue that, you know, for the foreseeable future. But obviously, if officers are going to advise us, but I would hope, even if the advice was that we stop doing this, I hope we would have a sensible discussion about it, because I think it's very unhelpful, both for us as board members, but also probably for the public not to know, you know, to whom these comments and feedback are attributable.
I fully understand the points you're making, Councillor Smith, and it is generally the case, but not always, that minutes of council meetings, and this of course is not a council, but minutes of council meetings tend to be anonymised, except for certain individuals like the leader and so on. Now, it is for the combined authority and ultimately for the board to determine how the minutes of meetings of its committees are recorded. And given that we've been given no guidance, I'm more than happy to carry on as we did last time. And if we are unhappy with the guidance which we are given, I'm quite confident that you will bring it up in the board, Bridget. Any other comments about the accuracy of the minutes? Then in the absence of any other comment, I will take it that members are satisfied as to the accuracy of the minutes, and I will sign those minutes as a true record when we get back to being able to meet each other in person. If I may move on to matters arising, of which there are quite a number, where of course we have an item already on the agenda for next time, for this meeting, relating to a minute of the last meeting. I'd much rather take the matter up when we get to that particular agenda item. But going through a list, and I see that, Bridget, will you want, have you still got your blue hand up? Fine.
No, I've got a matter arising. Okay.
Well, I've got a list of matters arising to go through first, which may be helpful. First of all, in minute 81, when we asked for progress, or we were offered progress on the review of the £100 million housing programme. A meeting was going to be taking place in September with MHCLG. My understanding is that meeting only took place last week, which is why there was no opportunity to put a report into the agenda pack. And I believe that, Roger, you have a verbal update to give us on that meeting which took place with MHCLG.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we had a meeting with Bees MHCLG last week. I think it's fair to say that the meeting was held in a good and positive atmosphere. The meeting was originally targeted around our progress with programme delivery, and we've supplied quite a lot of data to Bees MHCLG around that, where we've shown some, I think, good progress since we last met them, and I think that was quite well received. I have to be a little cautious about what I say, because a lot of what we talked about was taken away by them for them to report to their minister, and we'll get some clear indication of their attitude to some of the items that we discussed once they've had that discussion with minister at ministerial level. Of course, there's also been this change of minister, and that literally while we were having the meeting, Simon Clark resigned, and Luke Hall is now the Minister for Regional Growth and Local Government. So they'll need to bring him up to speed. One of the things that they did flag to us is that I think before the meeting they were hoping that they'd be able to come back to us on some of the issues discussed within 2 or 3 weeks. I think they're suggesting that that timetable with a new minister may increase to 4 to 6 weeks. but they are aware that we have our next meeting on the 9th of November, and we want in good time to know what the feedback is from that review meeting so we can report fully to the committee on the 9th of November, and also hopefully be able to progress a significant number of housing opportunities at that meeting. There was some brief discussion and acknowledgement of papers. We presented quite a lot of papers to them beforehand around the backstop date for the programme, which we still believe as being March 2022. There wasn't a huge debate about that at the meeting. I think there's obviously some sort of thought or plan that the civil servants have around that, which I hope will result in a positive outcome, and our date of March 2022 being confirmed. And that's sort of as much as I can say, I think, at the moment, as the output from that meeting. So as soon as we get formal sort of feedback, I will circulate. I won't wait necessarily until the next committee meeting. I will circulate that around the committee as soon as I get it.
It's extremely helpful. Thank you, Roger. Do any members have any questions for Roger about that verbal update? Mike, Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I was disappointed to find out after our last meeting, because I think there's been a Freedom of Information request that there had already been correspondence from the Ministry on the 6th of June, which actually predates our last meeting, where there was no indication at all that this would be the final review meeting. All that was going to happen in September is, according to the letter, at least from the Ministry, is that in September there will be a reassessment of progress. And I think it is important that we're accurately brought up to date on these things, because you know, we have a responsibility for the delivery of this programme as a committee, and I do ask that in future we are accurately kept up to date with the information we're given.
I think, Mike, we were told there would be a year-end review, and I think that this is very much a matter of semantics, isn't it? I don't think it was ever going to be a final review, but I must admit, I personally had hoped that we'd get a slightly more substantial response than we have, but we can now look forward, I hope, to something more significant coming forward in the very near future.
So are you saying the minutes are inaccurate? Because it does say he clarified a final review meeting had been scheduled for early September, and I took that to read that was going to close the issue off, but in the letter I saw from the Ministry, it was just going to be an update progress meeting. So that's
really interesting, Mike, because the notes I took at the time said a year-end review. So we've got three different definitions there, but I think we can all agree there was going to be a review.
Fine.
But thank you for that, Mike. It is helpful. Any other comments about Roger's statement before moving on to other matters arising? No? Okay. Still on in minute 81, there was a request that officers review the role of the committee in relation to tourism in light of COVID, and to report back. That is provisionally planned for the January committee meeting. In minute 85, oh, Bridget. Councillor Smith.
Yes, so I wanted to comment on that. You know, we've got tourism in absolute crisis at the moment in our area, and actually countrywide. I just feel January is just too late. You know, we as a committee, if we are responsible for tourism, you know, we need to be on it now. We can't, you know, dilly about until January, waiting for some report clarifying what our role is here. So I'm really disappointed that this work hasn't been done to be brought to this committee, because we're in an emergency situation here. And as I say, tourism's in crisis, and we need, if there are things we should be doing them now, because there's going to be loads of businesses linked with tourism who are not going to be in business anymore by the time we get to January.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And you are, of course, entirely correct that there are some matters of real urgency for many individual businesses which are in the tourist sector throughout the combined authority area. However, it is important that we don't have any duplication of efforts, or even worse, that we work at cross purposes. And as you are aware, tourism is a significant part of the work which is being done by the Combined Authority as a whole, in order to make sure not merely that we recover from COVID, but that we renew our local economy. And quite a number of the 34 initiatives which there are, which are, I believe, coming before our next meeting of the board, do relate in whole or in part to tourism. So I think that the idea that we necessarily would be initiating anything specifically to do with tourism might be something of a misnomer, but it is entirely correct for us to be reviewing what is happening as far as tourism is concerned. And were our November meeting not already so heavily packed with a large number of other items, I would be advocating bringing it forward to November. The later we leave it, of course, if we do leave it to January, it will just mean we will see more of what happens after the furlough system has finished, and might give us a better perspective. But things are being done urgently, just not by our committee. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Smith?
I think it will have to be. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 85, on the minute 85, to report. We were told we'd have a report on spend and outputs for the £70 million Cambridge City affordable housing scheme, and that would be provided to us at this meeting. And that hasn't happened because of the deferral of any decision as far as MHCLG is concerned as to the final date of the scheme as a whole. We do anticipate, and Roger Thompson, again, you will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we do anticipate that by the time of the next meeting we will have that information, and so a report will be able to be produced there which will have substantial new, or at least more certainly defined information than we'd be able to provide at the moment.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 86, minute 86, to do with the Roman Fields Paston development. We were promised that there would be a note to members confirming the arrangements with the applicant for the houses to remain as affordable units beyond the initial 10 years. I don't know if everyone has seen it, but a note has been circulated to all members of the committee this morning, giving that assurance and explaining how the provider will ensure that that takes place. I don't know if anyone's got any further questions to add to that report if they've seen it yet. If you haven't seen it yet and there's something you wish to raise, then please do so at the next meeting, or raise a question by email. Mike, Councillor Sargent.
I've got a matter arising on this item. I'm not clear if you're wanting me to take that now or whether you want to run through your items first.
I have nothing more on minute 86, so if it's to do with minute 86, then please do so.
It's really around the issue of additionality, which obviously I've raised a number of times, and I'm not sure we really got to grips last time with that issue. And I was looking back at my time on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and realised that we did actually raise this way back in September 2018, when I think you were on the committee as well, Chair. But most importantly, I think at our meeting on the 24th of November of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we did stress there needed to be a method and a measurement of additionality to make sure that we are delivering schemes which do add value, if you like. And the director did say that officers were keen to ensure they did not discourage any applications by too strict a methodology. And I note in some of the correspondence with the ministry, they're actually casting doubt on whether all of our schemes do actually provide additionality, particularly Mere Fen at Northstowe. And this comes back to an earlier point that we do need the information on additionality so that we can make proper judgments. I mean, we are making judgments on behalf of the combined authority, but we're not necessarily being given the information to make that judgment. And, you know, I think going forward, we need to make sure that we will be providing full information on additionality. I don't know the reason why the ministry are concerned about additionality in terms of Mere Fen. But as I say, overview and scrutiny back in 2018, so in fact 2 years ago, asked to see what the methodology was, and we were told, well, we didn't want methodology to get in the way of approving schemes. In effect, deliverability was the most important thing. So can we resolve the issue of additionality so in future we actually have a full part in the report for these schemes which shows additionality, which I assume has to be in agreement with MHCLG if they're casting doubt on one of our schemes so far.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mike. Just to jog your memory from 2 years ago, the member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee who was most vocal about being concerned about the definition of additionality was the chairman of this current Committee of Housing and Communities. And so you are knocking at an open door as far as that's concerned. It is absolutely vital that we continue to be transparent. And my suggestion, whilst we certainly don't want to be over prescriptive in methodologies, it is appropriate for us to understand the definitions clearly, and the definitions aren't that difficult to understand. And if I make a request to Roger that a definition of additionality is circulated to everyone so that everyone can see what is meant by additionality, I think that will be helpful. Additionally, and we don't have any specific schemes to consider today, but we will at our next meeting in November, if I may make a request that the additionality calculations are spelt out even more clearly in all future reports, so that it can clearly be seen what is additional and why. That I think would be very helpful both for Councillor Sargent and for the other members of the committee, if that's acceptable to you, Mike.
Very good, thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Moving on to minute 87. The Director of Housing was requested by Councillor Sargent to circulate further information regarding the setting of affordable rent levels, and how it worked at a national level. That will be produced at the next meeting, I understand, in November. And apologies, Mike, that actually got overlooked. It wasn't marked as an action point in the minutes. It should have been. So apologies, it's not at this meeting. It will be at the next one. And then on minute 89, we had the query, again, one of my queries relating to a report on the difference in house building viability between the north and the south of the combined authority area. And that links in with the housing market assessment reports. And that is all planned for the next meeting, for the meeting in November. And we will get that report and we will be able to discuss it. And I think that will be quite eye-opening for some members. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes which aren't going to be covered in the rest of the agenda? Mike, you've still got your hand up. Mike? Councillor Sargent, you're muted at the moment.
Thank you. So minute 91, first to note that we hadn't got a programme update for this meeting, although it was in our forward plan. And I think it's essential, even if we haven't got schemes to approve, that we do get an update at each meeting. But again, coming back to my earlier point about additionality, if the ministry's decision at the end is that Mere Farm at Northstowe is not a valid site, then that actually knocks 540 starts, well, not starts, I think it's about 250 at the moment, but in total 540 homes off our delivery. And I think it's vital that we do consider this today, because I think potentially we're in an emergency situation where I acknowledge that we're negotiating in terms of when the end date will be, March 21 or March 22, but it is vital that we do deliver on these 2,000 homes, and potentially, at least in the eyes of the ministry, that's even more seriously in doubt than we've been led to believe in the past. So we do need, I come back to my earlier point, we do need accurate information. I think Mere Farm was in doubt at our previous meeting when I raised about the current status. I was told we were going to deliver, but it looks as though we were already going to lose potentially 540 starts before the last meeting. And we need to be kept up to date on these sort of things. If it's said that this is a sensitive piece of information, we could obviously have the discussion with the press not present, but I think it's important. We as a committee responsible for the delivery of the £60 million schemes need to know what's going on. And I feel at the moment we're not being trusted necessarily with all of that information.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, I have to give an apology. I should have added minute 91 in my long list. The reason that we don't have that report is the same as the reason we don't have the report on the 70 million Cambridge City Affordable Housing Scheme, and that is without having this final determination by the MHCLG about our final date, it was felt that we weren't actually going to be able to be giving anything new to the committee to allow the committee to have any discussion today. The next meeting, the meeting in November, will have that information, and we'll then know very clearly what is expected of us by the MHCLG and by what date. As far as Mere Farm is concerned, to the best of my knowledge, but Roger might be able to update this, but to the best of my knowledge, no determination has yet been made about whether all or part of the Mere Farm allocation is able to be counted as far as additionality is concerned. Roger may have a better update on that position. If not, we'd expect to be told as soon as it's possible. Roger, can you advise?
Thank you, Chair. I think what I can say is that it was discussed at the meeting. Bees and MHCLG have taken that away, and clearly that's part of the discussion that they're going to have with the Minister. The reason Mere Fen's a little different is because it's at the moment one of the few schemes in our programme that's an infrastructure grant for flood remediation, rather than being a loan or more traditional grant. And I think that possibly is in danger of sort of confusing things a little bit. If you go back to where Mere Fen was being discussed in March 18, at that time, no one actually was offering to pay for those works. There seemed to be a bit of a void, and therefore the time the Combined Authority stepped in, and that story is what we told and explained to MHCLG Bees last week. So we await the outcome of those considerations.
Thank you. I'm sorry to hear there hasn't been any further update then, but when we do have the information on that, I think it is, of course, as Mike said, vitally important that we do get to discuss it. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the point, Chair, that it is important that we know what's going on. And I think I've mentioned a couple of examples today where I feel the Director of Housing has given warm words, if you like, when I've asked for information on the current status and my concerns about whether we're going to deliver the 2,000 when it was very clearly under threat at that stage. And we do need to be kept appraised. We're in the last, irrespective of what date we're due to finish by, we've still got a very steep hill to climb to deliver on housing. And I would hope that going forward, we are going to be given up-to-date information at our meetings, or if it's not something that can be in the public domain, we have to find another way of keeping us up to date.
Thank you, Mike. I don't think that the issue here is whether it can be in the public domain or not. It's that we just do not know at this stage, and we are still waiting for MHCLG to come back to us for this to be determined and be able to be reported to us. So when that is possible, and I'm quite confident from what I hear that it will be done by the time of the next meeting, then we will have that information and we'll have it as a matter of certainty rather than having a discussion on a rather theoretical basis about whether it may or may not be included, and if so, to what extent. But your point is well taken, and I'm sure that officers will make sure that the information which is provided at various meetings is as complete and accurate as it possibly can be at that time. But thank you for raising the issue, Mike. Right, are there any other matters arising before we go to the main part of the agenda? No, thank you very much indeed. Right, move on to agenda item 1.2, the Housing and Communities Committee Actions Log. An updated action log was included in the published papers for this meeting. If any members have any questions on the action log, would they use the raised hand function on the right of their screen now to show this, please? No members have indicated they wish to speak, so we'll take the action log as noted. Agenda item 1.3 is public questions. To the best of my knowledge, and officers please tell me if I'm wrong, we've received no public questions or petitions. So if that is the case, we will move on to the next item of business.
Yes, no public questions or petitions received, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. We have the Combined Authority Forward Plan, I believe, which if anyone has any comments to make on that. No comments? Raise your blue hand if you wish to, in which case we can note that. And next, the Housing and Communities the Housing and Communities Committee Agenda Plan on pages 19 to 21. If any committee members have any comments on the agenda plan? Nope, so we will note that as well. We can move on to part 2 of the agenda, which is programme delivery. And the first item, agenda item 2.1, is the Community Land Trust Setup Grant Criteria and Application Form. Just putting this into context, the Combined Authority Board has already agreed to allocate £100,000 towards setting up community land trusts across the Combined Authority area, and we're now being asked to set the grant criteria and to determine the application form. Emma, are you in a position to give an introduction to this, please?
I am. Thank you, Chairman. I've also got my colleague Emily Mulvaney here to answer any questions of detail that members might have after I've given a short outline. So as rightly pointed out, the item for you today seeks for the approval of the Community Land Trust Setup Grant. And across the Combined Authority area, we already do have many community land trusts that have been established and are operational. And these are currently in East Cambridgeshire, South Cambridgeshire, and in Huntingdonshire. In the report, you'll see that the Combined Authority has a vision to have the most advanced community-led housing sector in the UK, and this is one of the ways that we can do that, which is to provide a grant of up to £5,000 for those wishing to become incorporated. What we're not doing today, Chairman, is asking for any actual money to be released, but to approve the process in which communities can start to make the applications to become an incorporated body and to help with some of those setup costs for community engagement, etc. So I'll leave it at that, Chairman, and as I said, I'm happy to take any questions, and I've got Emily here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Members, do you have any questions to ask for Emma? Councillor Sargent first. Mike.
Yeah, just about information really. So it's just been mentioned about incorporation, and I've gone onto the CLT network page looking at membership, and they talk about statutory definition of CLT, but it wasn't totally clear from the report what we're expecting people to have, the end point, if you like, of our engagement to get them up and running. What does this incorporation mean? Is it a legally defined endpoint, or is it a slightly more vague point, shall I say?
I can take that, Emma, if you want.
Yep.
Yeah, so incorporation we define as a legally incorporated entity, registered with whatever the appropriate regulatory body is for the legal form that they've chosen. So typically it might be a community benefit society registered with the Financial Conduct Authority, or it could be a charity, or there are another couple of legal forms, but yes, it is the legally incorporated body.
Okay.
Mike, any more? Do you want to follow that up?
Well, a slightly different question. I note that it's not just for homes, although our remit is around homes. So if somebody wanted to set up a CLT which isn't for homes, would they be eligible to get our funding for it? Because I would be surprised if that were the case, that we were spending £5,000 of grant money in effect for an open space or something like that.
Emma?
Chairman, through you, Chair, it would be for homes, not for, because CLTs can do many things, but this was specifically targeted about increasing the housing, Chairman.
So perhaps we need to update the form then, Chair, to indicate that, because at the moment I think it gives people the option of saying that they would be doing it for, say, an open space or the like, which, as I say, is not really within our remit or gift at the moment, I don't think.
I have to admit, Mike, reading through the form, it didn't even occur to me that that was possible, but it doesn't specifically state within the form that it's not possible. So with the agreement of the officers, it makes sense to amend the form to make it abundantly clear that the CLT shall only be for the purpose of homes.
Yeah.
And sorry, one other point, Chair, on similar if you like, but it says it could be you're setting up a CLT, or you could be setting up a cooperative, and a cooperative could be, I guess, for other purposes. So there might be the need to just perhaps with the Chair to run through it to make sure it is very much against our remit rather than any other remit that there might be for such organisations.
I'm sure officers will be able to do that with me with no problem at all.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Smith. Bridget.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I've got a few questions. So why £5,000? What research have we done with CLTs and with the advisory bodies? And I know that, I've had lots of talks from specialists in CLTs over the last 2 or 3 years. So why 5,000? Is it going to be enough, or are we going to be giving people an inadequate amount of money that actually they won't then be able to achieve their goals? So I'm also interested in how much engagement we've had with the existing advisory bodies in the East of England on this, because I know there's considerable expertise there. At 2.10, we say rather patronisingly that the Combined Authority is going to turn up at all our authorities to explain what CLTs are to us. And actually, I think we know what CLTs are actually. It then goes on to explain what the Combined Authority's role is going to be. So I think, that's great. But, most of us are ahead of the game on this one. And it keeps talking about the preparation of a full business case. So I'm struggling reading this to understand, what this full business case is going to be. What's its purpose? What is it going to achieve? So I need a bit more information there. If we're giving money out to people, this is public money, how are we monitoring it? How are we making sure that it's going to be delivering value for money? Now, I know quite a lot about grants, and I know that sometimes you give grants to people and they don't achieve what they wanted to achieve for a myriad of reasons, and actually that's fine, but we've got to make sure that we're getting adequate feedback on that about why people have failed to deliver. In the form to fill in, I really don't understand the relevance at this stage of the game about whether people are going to be using local building materials. It seems to be completely and utterly irrelevant to whether people are going to set up a CLT. That seems to be something for way down the line, so I don't know why we're asking that. We're also asking people if they've done a housing needs surveys. Now, housing needs surveys can be extremely expensive bits of work. So, if we're dealing with a willing group of people in a community, how are they going to get the resources to do a housing needs survey? And should that actually be one of the things that we should be funding? Because at the end of the day, if we are helping them fund that piece of work, if they've got no other source of income to do it, then that actually gives the rationale for setting up a CLT, because without it, if there is no evidence of need, actually we shouldn't be giving them any money if there's no need for housing. But how are they going to get the money to do that bit of work? So I just feel we're getting our horses and carts a bit mixed up here. That's all for now.
Thank you very much indeed, Bridget. You did ask 6 or 7 questions there. I actually lost count. And may I point out to you and to all members of the committee that I'll always show a great deal of latitude to come back to a member for further questions. So you're more than welcome just to ask 1 or 2 questions at a time to get the answers to those, and then we'll move on to your next questions. I won't jump over you. I will always come back to you to make sure that you don't have further questions. Officers, between you, I hope you've got answers to all of Councillor Smith's questions. Emma, would you care to start, please?
I'll start. Thank you, Chairman. Through you, Chairman. So the reason why 5,000, and this is based on the experience that we have in both East Cambridgeshire and in South Cambridgeshire, is the amount of the cost of becoming incorporated, the cost of hiring halls, and the cost of that community engagement. So it is based on, we do know it would be enough to get us to an incorporated level. So the next question relates to the existing bodies in the current CLT network. I'm pleased to report that we have actually started to engage with CAMS-Acre, who are leading on a piece of work about the Eastern Hub. So, and I'd hope to be able to bring in a report about that engagement as an update to members to the next committee meeting for you, so that you can see the engagement, the work that we're doing, because we have recognised that in order to scale this up across the area, we need to make sure that these CLTs have access to information and a pool in a central way so that it can be scaled. So that work is ongoing, and I'll be happy to send an update to members on that. The reference to the full business case isn't about this incorporation stage. It's actually what happens once we've got all these CLTs incorporated across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. What's the next step for the combined authority? And what interventions could we put in place? As Councillor Smith has indicated, they get going, but actually what's next? What we need to do at this stage is assess how many CLTs we could deliver in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area, and then be able to assess what the barriers to those delivery are, and whether that's through either further grant or loan financing or technical advice or things like that. So that's what we mean by full business case. In terms of the monitoring and evaluation, when someone makes an application for grant, they'll be required to provide us with invoices, etc. And how you would evaluate that is by the fact that they're legally incorporated with the evidence to back up their spend. What we won't do is just say, here's 5,000, we'll see you in a few years' time. We will agree with them as part of their grant condition letter, the evidence that they need to provide to satisfy us that they have gone through a grant application process. The question for local building is an interesting question for members, but it's to flag up at an early stage that this is also about trying to use local resources to get their sites going. It's an early indicator to say to the CLTs, you know, you're a local CLT, don't forget to use your local resources. And the housing needs survey, I'll have to take that one away, and maybe Emily can address it on whether or not a housing needs survey is absolutely necessary. But it also provides that thing to the CLT early on to indicate that you would have to establish a need, but how you communicate that need is different. So it may not need to be necessarily the old traditional approach to a full-blown housing needs survey. Emily, I think I've covered off everything, but is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add on the housing needs survey, obviously some communities already have one that's been done by a housing association for another purpose, or by the parish council, potentially as part of a neighbourhood planning process. And CLTs might also look at their own local resources in evidencing the need, particularly in the early stages. It might be something as simple as collecting expressions of interest. So sometimes they might not have the full-blown report, but they are starting to build some kind of evidence base. Also on the 5,000 startup amount of funding, that's also reflected nationally. So the National CLT Network ran a very successful startup grant funding programme, fairly similar to this one, and they found that £5,000 was the ideal amount of money also.
That's very helpful, thank you, Emily. Bridget.
Thank you very much. So thank you. Really helpful answers. So can we just be careful on the monitoring and evaluation? You really don't want, for £5,000, which is a small amount of public money, you really don't want to be seeing every invoice for every time a hall was hired or, 20 leaflets were printed. So, I think we just need to, you need to say to people they need to keep records and they need to keep records and they need to be there if called upon. But, you really do not want brown envelopes full of little scraps of paper arriving because you haven't got the resources to deal with it.
Emma, I hope you would agree with that.
I agree with that entirely. Councillor Smith, we won't make it we won't turn it into an industry on its own of collecting receipts.
Thank you, Emma, extremely helpful. Anything further, Bridget? Fine. Councillor David Ambrose-Smith. David.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm just a little bit concerned of what's just been said regarding CLTs and only available for homes, because there are already projects going on and which have been funded through CLs, which are CLTs. So what's going to happen with those other projects in the future? They will not come to this particular committee. Is that what we're saying? Or not go through this grant process? Is that what we're saying? Do you understand? Yes, Emma.
Yes, Emma.
Yes, I think I understand what you're saying, Councillor Ambrose-Smith. Obviously, each local authority may have its own grant application process for things, but we do have them that anything for so let me start at the beginning. What we have where you've got open spaces or renewable energy thing, if it comes accompanied by homes, that will be fine. So it always must be associated with homes. If other local authorities or other bodies want to set up CLTs purely to deliver, but they don't come with homes, then no, it's not a possibility for a grant to be awarded through this committee. Mm-hmm. But you can have things that run together. So as long as it's associated with homes, it wouldn't be ruled out. But it would need to come with associated homes, because that's how these things work as well. I hope that clarifies.
Yes, yeah. Just another point which was mentioned earlier. I'm very much happy with the explanation and so forth in the paper of CLTs. I think it does keep us focused, and I think that's something we should always be focused. But I also the paper in itself, the vision and these grants, having seen some grant applications come forward, I have got to say that the £5,000 to me seems about right, and the whole document itself is well written, and thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you, David. Very helpful. Any other members? Well, we are being asked to approve the grant criteria and application form as set out in Appendix 1, which is on pages 27 to 34 of the pack. But that should be subject to the need to amend to ensure that reference is made to CLTs and co-ops being there and being directed towards the provision of homes. So that is quite clear. Does any member want this to be a recorded vote, or are you happy to accept this is going to be accepted unanimously? Unanimously? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Take that recommendation as carried. Now move on to agenda item point 2, which is on pages 35 to 52 of your pack, the 100k homes allocation policy. Which I believe, Emma, you are going to be presenting. I believe, if I understood correctly from Councillor Hickford separately, Councillor Hickford, you are going to be proposing an amendment to this, and I think it's quite helpful for that to be done early on in the process. And my understanding, if I've got it correct, Roger, is you're proposing that the 80,000 figure in terms of the salary cap be reduced to 50,000, if I've understood that correctly?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Let Emma introduce the paper first, and then if we come straight on to your amendment and discuss that before we talk about the substantive paper. Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will recall that this came to your last meeting of the Housing Community Committee, and you required officers to go back and do some more work on the detail that they would like to see. We undertook that work, and I'd like to thank the Sub-Regional Housing Board, the Probation Service and South Cambridgeshire District Council officers specifically, who took the time to meet with us to produce the draft that you see before you today. Just to run through some of the key elements of the document, again, without going into too much detail because we have discussed this previously. The 100k homes are designed to enable people to live and work locally. and the criteria has been designed around trying to achieve that balance. There's 4 eligibility criteria, the first being that an inability to afford open market ownership. And whilst you've got an amendment to discuss, I just wanted to explain the rationale behind the 80k limit that members have in front of them. And this maximum income limit was set at 80,000, and it reflects the national income limit set for affordable ownership products. So that's the rationale behind why an 80,000 limit was set. Applicants will need to demonstrate a local connection to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and the policy sets out how you can do that. You cannot currently own a home to apply for one of these, and you must not have access to capital that is over 25% of the discounted value of the property, in which case this is £25,000. Now we set it at 25% because you obviously have to make allowances for the deposit amount, the cost of a move, the legal fees and that sort of thing. So it would be reasonable for someone to have capital of up to £25,000 because of all the costs associated with moving. So, and then as I've already mentioned, the policy document sets out the scores, and some of the definitions that members had raised last time as well have been expanded upon in the guidance document. So I'll leave it at that, Chairman. I'm happy to take questions, and also, again, Emily is here to answer any that members may have as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. That's very helpful indeed, very helpful summary. Roger, if we may move to your amendment, you are proposing that the 80,000 limit for salary cap be reduced to 50,000. I'm more than happy to second that formally. Would you care to explain why you believe that is a sensible amendment to make to the paper?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy with all the other eligibility, but I just feel that we need to make it clear who we're trying to target this for. And for me, I understand 80,000 is taken from national guidance, etc. But, you know, we need to make this more localised. And for me, someone earning up to 80,000 actually does have great possibilities of owning a home, whereas those with a lower income are much more restricted. And I think that's who we're trying to target. I do feel we're going to get a lot of applicants for this anyway. And I feel that the level set at about 50,000 would actually target those people that we are trying to help the most. And so if we were to have the higher limit, I think not only would we get inundated with people wanting to buy a home, which is fine, but what it will do is it will not necessarily restrict it to those people we're most trying to help. And therefore, that's why I'm proposing a £50,000 limit here. And I thank the Chair for seconding it.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll open this amendment for debate if anyone wishes to say anything. Councillor Smith. Bridget.
Thank you. So that's really interesting. And I do agree that, you know, the Mayor's vision has always been that the £100,000 house scheme will be something different and, you know, and attractive and accessible to a group of people who are currently excluded from any sort of home ownership. But I would like to hear from officers that if this amendment is passed and the threshold is put at 50,000, is this scheme affordable for people on that sort of household income, please?
I will let officers answer that first before moving on to Ryan. Emma?
Through you, Chairman. Yes, it would be affordable. What we would have to do is be mindful that we need to see how the lenders react. So what I would ask is that we put it in as we can accept it if that's what committee wishes to do, change its criteria. But if it becomes evident that a lender won't lend on that kind of cap, then I may need to come back to committee later on. But with a 50,000 limit doesn't to me seem on the face of it like it would be a barrier, but we would need to keep that assessed, Chairman, and bring it back to committee if it does.
That's helpful. Thank you. Are you happy with that, Bridget? Bridget, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks. So just leading on for that. So I wouldn't like to think that if the lenders, who are the most cautious people in the world, just go no, that actually we leave it at there. You know, I would like us to then start thinking creatively, because again, you know, it's because of the lenders that so many people are precluded from home ownership. So I would then hope we would start thinking creatively about how we could overcome that barrier, or if there are some lenders who we can partner with who will, take a more lenient approach. So I would hope that we would look for solutions rather than just take that as a dead end.
I think that goes without saying, Bridget, that we would do that. If you remember, the mayor's original intention was that the 100k homes would be accessible to a couple, both of whom were on minimum income. Now, I'm not quite sure whether that is achievable precisely in terms of what a mortgage company would accept, but it certainly would go a significant way towards that position that the mayor set out. But you are entirely correct, Bridget. If it turns out that the lenders don't play ball, it really is necessary for us to be more imaginative and to look for alternatives. Councillor Fuller, Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to support Councillor Hickford's amendment to this, but I do agree with everything that Councillor Smith has just said as well. I think if I've understood the Mayor's vision for this correctly, which I hope I have, the worst thing that could possibly happen to the 100k homes is it just becomes another tool, such as Help to Buy, shared ownership, that people have as an option. I completely understood, as Councillor Hickford has said, that this should be targeting those people that don't have all those other options. So I think we need to pitch this in at this sort of level. And that's where I come back to agreeing with what Bridget's just said, because we shouldn't just be supplementing what's already available there in the market. We need to be trying to find solutions to help those people that can't get things done otherwise. So I'm very happy to support the amendment on that basis, Chairman.
Thank you, Ryan. Mayor James Palmer, you would like to say a word?
Yes, if I can work the system, please apologies. As the Mayor's vision has been mentioned several times in this conversation, I just want to make it clear to the members exactly what the Mayor's vision is, and I think all of them are probably right. The idea of the 100k home is to disrupt the market from what's available, to give people who are forced into rent an option to own their own house. Of course, it is aimed primarily at those on the lowest income. And the early work that we have done has shown that even if you're earning as little as £18,000 a year, you could potentially own one of these homes. And the work that we've done with lenders has also been to try and make sure we break the cycle that has been mentioned of lenders only offering money to those who can already afford it. And of course, some of the extra criteria that are built into the 100k home, the fact that you can't sell it above market rate, but if you default on your mortgage, the mortgage company can, are designed entirely to make sure that mortgage companies have that extra threshold of comfort when they come to offer mortgages on these houses. So I'm very comfortable about the 50 grand, 80 grand argument. I totally understand and think that's a very wise suggestion by Councillor Hickford. And as I said, the ambition, the vision, if you like, is to help people on considerably lower wages than that, if possible. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, James. I'm not gathering any opposition to this amendment. Does anyone want to go to a vote on this, or can I take it that the amendment will be accepted unanimously? Everyone happy with that? Good. Okay, that amendment is accepted unanimously. We can now move to the motion as amended, and we can discuss the whole motion as amended. Any members care to speak? Mayor Palmer, I assume you've just left your hand up accidentally? James? Oh, that's good. Thank you very much indeed. Mike, Councillor Sargent first.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight something in the report which I think was slightly unfortunate. So this is on page 37, 3.6, which is the interactions with the sub-regional housing board. It's, the unfortunate phrase is, while there is no legal duty to consult on an allocation policy. I think it gives the wrong emphasis, and we've talked, I think, when we were talking about the housing strategy 2 years ago at Overview and Scrutiny, that we were disappointed that there wasn't enough involvement with local authorities who've got a day-to-day experience on housing matters, and in particular the Housing Board, which isn't just constituent councils, but also registered providers as well. And it is important that the housing side of the combined authority is working on an ongoing basis with all the local authorities locally, and doesn't put this sort of emphasis across, which makes it look as though we've done it slightly begrudgingly. But anyway, I'll move on. My concern really is about the definition of settlement. So in terms of assessing whether people meet the criteria, you either have to live in the parish or an adjoining settlement on a list that will be somehow provided. And although people might think of me as a city boy, my grandfather was a farmer, and I wonder what the issue would be for my mother or her siblings if they wanted to avail themselves of this when they lived in a farmhouse well away from any settlement. So I know Councillor Fuller was also concerned last time that there was some issue that in an adjoining parish where you might live, there was never any chance of such houses being built, and it wouldn't give you an opportunity to score highly enough. And I'm not sure we've got this right yet in terms of making sure that people get a chance to buy one of these homes. I'll also make the other point that I made. You know, there's probably about well over 100,000 people in Cambridge who would potentially be given the opportunity if a £100,000 home was built in Cambridge. But by this narrow definition for parishes, the number of people who might be eligible could be just in the low thousands. So I think there's still some more work to do in terms of making sure that people can actually get the chance to buy one of these £100,000 homes in terms of our definition of where you live.
I think, Councillor, I'll come to you in a second, Emily. I think, Councillor Sargent, you've hit the nail on the head there when you're talking about the numbers involved, that the demand that there is going to be is massively, massively going to outstrip the supply. And there are many individuals who we might like to have the opportunity to get one of these homes who honestly never will, because there will never be the supply to match or even come close to matching the demand. I think you're entirely correct to identify that as an issue. And it's an issue, it doesn't matter which way you slice the cake is much smaller than the number of mouths which wish to eat the cake. And we are going to have a situation where not everyone is, this policy is not going to solve every single issue that we've got in terms of the provision of affordable housing in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and no one has ever pretended that it would do. Emily, you wish to say something? My apologies for interrupting you.
Jump in. I may have misunderstood the question with regards to settlements, because you mentioned people that live perhaps further out of a settlement. We don't define it as the settlement, we define it as the parish boundary. So everyone will fall, parish, town or city boundary, everyone will fall within one of those settlement boundaries. There won't be anyone that's not related to a settlement. Apologies if I've misunderstood what you meant, but I thought that might be what you were concerned about.
Well, sorry, Chair, but it does actually indicate there will be a list of adjoining settlements. And I don't know what the definition of that is, Emily. It doesn't say a list of adjoining parishes. So this could be a lot of individual homes that you're trying to list, because in my example, a farmhouse isn't part of a settlement, but you don't want to stop them from applying. So
yeah,
I'm still very concerned about what this word settlement means.
It does just refer to either the parish, town or city areas, but perhaps I can tweak the wording on that to make it clearer.
I think that would. I think it's really helpful to put on the record the fact that when you say settlement, you mean a parish or a town or an area without a parish or a town, such as Cambridge City.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything further on that, Mike, before moving on? I move on? Thank you. Councillor Smith, Bridget, you're next.
Thank you. Well, it's this issue as well I just want to talk about. So bearing in mind that some of our parishes are absolutely diddy, you know, and have 70 houses in them, and might have adjoining parishes that are similarly teeny. I think we need to be much more sophisticated about this, because what these £100,000 houses are in reality is a simply massive subsidy. And we've got to make sure we're being fair about this. So I think we need to be, if there is going to be a development in a parish, when we are looking at the allocations, and if there is nobody in that parish who wants one of the houses, we've got to make sure that in every situation, a similar number of people are able to bid in for it. So let's say one of these developments happens somewhere like Wisbech or March, I'd be reasonably confident that there would be uptake. If you did them in a little teeny village, you could end up with only, let's say, 200 households eligible to bid in. Whereas if the development was, you're shaking your head, Councillor, but I'm really happy for you to correct me on this. But if it was in a town, then, if there was some thousands of people living there, they'd all be eligible. So it's just about, the fairness here, and making sure that, this big subsidy is worth as much to the same number of people throughout the whole of Cambridgeshire, if that makes sense. And one really nitpicky thing, sorry, on syntax really, we keep in the paper and in the documentation, we keep saying applicants that. Should it not be applicants who? It really grated with me reading applicants that. It was kind of dehumanising. It may be acceptable council speak, but it just read a bit strangely to me.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Answering your second point first, it is a highly pernickety point that you raised, which I'm afraid also I feel extremely strongly about. I think those of us who feel like that are in a minority, but I think the minority sometimes should rule. So I think that unless anyone objects, we should ask that in all cases, applicants that be changed to applicants who, even if it is only 2 of us who complain about it. And I'm sure officers will be willing to accommodate that. To answer your first question, I must apologise for shaking my head while you were talking, Bridget. As chair, that's an unforgivable thing for me to have done. But I think you've slightly misunderstood the process. Absolutely anyone who is on the list in the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough can apply for absolutely any 100k home. There is no restriction on the applicant whatsoever. It's a matter of how many points you manage to get in each of the categories which are involved, thereby determining who gets priority. And you talk about there being an equity, and having complete equity between everyone in all circumstances is, with all due respect, an idealistic dream. But you do want some degree of equity. And there is an element of equity in this in the following way, and it's very rough and ready. And that is that you are completely correct that if there were a scheme for a 100k home in a relatively small village, then a relatively small number of individuals would have a much greater chance of getting that 100k home than would be the case if there was a similar 100k home available in March or in Wisbech. However, we know as a matter of fact there are going to be far more 100k homes made available in the large settlements than there are in the small settlements. So where you gain in terms of the possibility of gaining a 100k home if one's available, you lose where it comes to the availability of that 100k home in a small settlement in the first place. So there is some rough and ready equivalence there in terms of the opportunity which exists. And my personal feeling is, and I could be wrong about this, and I hope I am, but my personal feeling is that the overwhelming majority of the 100k homes are going to be in our larger settlements. And in fact, it's the people who are in the villages who are going to find it slightly more difficult to get access to a 100k home because there won't be that many 100k homes built in our smaller settlements. I could be wrong about that, and if I am, then I do apologise. I don't know if officers wish to respond to what Councillor Smith said. Emma.
I think you've articulated it well, Chairman. There's nothing further to add to what you've just said.
So
right.
could I...
May I come back to you, please? Yeah, always, Bridget. Yes, no problem.
So just a bit of clarification. So I've got on page 43, I've got up the point score table, and on connectivity, we're talking about currently lives in relevant city, town, parish, previously lived in a relevant city, town, parish. So does that not mean that if you if let's say, some of these houses were built in my village, and in relation to the, the neighbouring settlements or whatever, the closer you were to my village, the greater the weighting you would get. So if you were applying from your village, Councillor Bowden, you would score far less highly than if you lived in, in one of the adjoining settlements. So I think there is a weighting issue, is there not, as I'm reading this? Depends what we mean.
Yes, you're absolutely and utterly correct. And that is exactly what is intended within this. Now, I'm not going to be funny about it. I don't live in a village, I live in a town. And this actually reflects the point I was making before. Yes, you're entirely correct. If there were a 100k home available in your village, then those who currently live in the village or live in an associated village with your village will have a much greater allocation, a much greater scoring in terms of their current location. And someone like me in a town some distance away would get nothing at all so far as that was concerned. But the point is, with all due respect, there will be far more 100k homes produced in Whittlesea that I would be able to apply for than there would be in your village. So whilst yes, it is true that someone in your immediate location would very much benefit from a potential 100k home in your village, there just won't be that many of them. Whereas those in the towns, whilst there may be a lot more applicants in the towns, there would also be a greater supply. But you are entirely correct, that's entirely what the system is meant to do. We have a situation where we know we're going to have a lot more applicants than we've got places available. We're never going to have as many 100k homes as there will be people who apply to go onto the list to get a 100k home. So we do need to have some criteria which determine which individuals will get priority over which other individuals. And there aren't that many criteria which have been put forward as far as that's concerned. You've got the current residential address, you've got the employment location, whether someone's a key worker or not, whether they're a retiring member of the armed forces, and the location of close family. And all those seem to be reasonable things to be able to measure and to be able to make an assessment on. And I must admit, I've strained myself thinking about what could be alternative or different measures. And short of having a lottery, which I don't think is the best way to allocate homes, short of having a lottery, I was having real difficulty finding practical alternative ways of making a determination as to whether person A, person B, or person C should be allocated one of these scarce 100k homes. If someone can come up with a better system, I would love to hear it. I've challenged a few people to come up with a better system. No one has so far. And Bridget, please, I'll let you come back.
Thank you. So it's difficult. And the important thing is that we keep it under review. Are we planning any sort of appeal process here? Because people are going to be unhappy, and when they. So yeah, are we building an appeal process into it, or is our word law essentially? And I also just want to say this is a greatly improved document over the original draft we saw.
Oh, thank you for that. That's much appreciated, Councillor Smith. Emma.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Smith, on page 11, the final page of the document, it says decision reviews and complaints. So in the first instance, the application will be reviewed by our housing officers and then the housing manager. Then if someone's still not satisfied, they can go to the Director of Housing. And if it gets to the point where a person is still not satisfied, we're going to look at a way to ask the relevant constituent council to provide some sort of review on that. It is set out in the document at page 11, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Emma. Any further questions, Bridget? Thank you. Ryan, Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you probably know what I'm going to say, because it was the unintended consequences concern that I raised at the last meeting that I've raised with you subsequently. And again, Bridget's touched upon it there in her reference to the weighting. And I'm quite comfortable that we proceed with this, because I think you've quite rightly and fairly made the point that it's actually incredibly complex to come up with a solution that delivers an entirely equitable something that works for the whole county in every area. We're not going to do that. So we have to recognise we do need a policy, we do need to move this forward. But I would be very keen we do keep it under review, because I genuinely do believe there will be unintended consequences as a result of this. The fact remains, with the way that the weighting, the scoring, is sitting there against work and where you live, in those more urban areas where the availability of work is greater than in the smaller parishes, it does weight more towards that. And I think that is a concern. So I think we have to recognise that this isn't a solution that's going to work for every part of the county, and we are going to have to probably do a little bit more in those rural areas. I've also raised with you, Chairman, a rather strange incentive that I picked up in there of using an analogy of a nurse, who is a key worker, living in St Neots but working at Addenbrooke's, would actually score higher by applying for a house in Cambridge than they would staying in their hometown of St Neots. And I wasn't quite clear when we set off on this journey that that was the intention, that we were trying to encourage greater urbanisation and encourage people out of our more rural areas or the market towns into the bigger population centres because they would score more points by working in those cities. But if we accept that's what's happening, then I think we just have to get on with it, Chairman. So I'm very happy to support this today, but we really do need to keep those points under review because I think there probably will be some anomalies that throw up as we go along.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller, and I think you're entirely correct about that. One thing which it lies a little bit within our remit, that is yours, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Smith's and mine, to the extent that we do have any indirect influence over our planning committees and our planning processes, is to try and encourage 100k homes to be built in smaller communities and in some of the smaller villages as part of developments which are taking place. And if we have the opportunity to do that, I think it behoves us to do it. I certainly in Fenland will be trying to achieve that for exactly the reasons that you were saying, Councillor Fuller. But the one thing which is certain is we are not going to satisfy everyone with the number of 100k homes which are made available. I think your suggestion about reviewing this, keeping it under review, is very sensible. I'd like to see it particularly reviewed if it were the case that we've got so many 100k homes available that it becomes a matter of significant concern that we do get greater equity than we've got at the moment. But I think that we'll be starting off by sharing out a very small number, comparatively speaking, of 100k homes against a comparatively extremely large number of applicants. And that will not be an easy process, and there will be a lot of disappointed individuals, I'm sorry to say. Fortunately, there will be some people who will be satisfied, who will get 100k homes, and I hope those numbers will increase. Did I see an officer waving her hand? No, I didn't. No, okay. Ryan, do you want to come back, or you've said what you need to? Thank you very much indeed. Mike, I see your hand is up again, or is that from the first time?
It's up again, Chair, and I do support what Councillor Fuller's just said about the perverse situations we might get into, and I think it would be useful if the officers can keep a close eye on the applications that come in and the scores that we're giving people. It can be anonymised, but it would hopefully show if we are getting into that situation. What I want to clarify is whether people who live outside of the narrow geography can apply. So on page 43, talking about the stage 2 process. So they've already made an application to be on the list and they meet that criteria. So then they can go to the next stage of being notified that there are homes coming up in their area. The way I read it, that anybody outside of that narrower area, so they still have connections with Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, they are not eligible to apply full stop, because I think you were inferring, Chair, that they could apply. So it specifically says in the 3rd paragraph, will not be invited to complete a full application. Now, obviously, if they had a friend in one of the parishes where it is being offered, that information could be passed on and they could make an application. I want to know if that application will be ruled out of order full stop, as it were, or would they just get 0 point for the main scoring items on the criteria?
On This one, thank you, Mike, for that question. On this one, we'll pass it over to Emma for an adjudication. I have to admit that my interpretation was exactly your second one, that whilst it is rather pointless advertising every single home to every single person in the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough who's on the list, only limited numbers would be invited. Anyone who's on the list could apply. They just wouldn't get many, if any, points on the local connections qualification. That was my reading of it. You read it slightly differently. So Emma, would you adjudicate, is either of us right or are we both wrong?
I think, Chairman, it's a matter for us to take away and look at how we can tidy up the language. So we can't stop anyone from putting an application in, but as you rightfully say, where you've got 50 in one area, you will get 0 points for being outside of the immediate area. So we wouldn't take them forward into stage 2. What we will do, but it provides a safeguard as you cascade out. If, someone decided, no, I'm not going to apply for these, and you just keep cascading out so that we can still allocate these properties. But the very likelihood is you would not get any points, so you wouldn't make it through to that next part. But we'll look at how we can tidy up some of the language in that, Chairman, to provide absolute clarity so that the users of these documents clearly understand what's in front of them.
Thank you. I think that will be helpful. And I think that you've basically said that both of us are right in what we said in practice.
Yes, it's all a matter of interpretation, Chairman, but we will seek to provide some clarity.
Thank you very much for that. Sorry, Mike?
It will be interesting to know if we have a web page listing all these, in which case, we will have a notification list for everybody who's got past stage 1, and we only send the formal invites out to those who meet the geography, the limited geography criteria. So it will be useful if Emma could report back at some stage as to how she's going to handle all of this.
If I may, Chairman, I think we're about to get ready to start going out to the formal expression of interest for our Fordham properties. I'll be quite happily provide an update this committee as to how that process went and what the detail of that process will be, and if we recommend any changes as a result of that. So we Fordham as a test case.
I think that would be extremely helpful, Emma, and we do look forward to having accumulated statistics made available, because I think all of us have concerns about how this will work in practice, and until we see how it works in practice, we won't know how we need to amend it. And I'm pretty sure eventually we will need to amend the process that we've got at the moment, but this is the process that we're starting with. Councillor David Ambrose-Smith. David. You're muted, David.
I would have thought after all these months I would know, wouldn't you? Thank you, Chair. My point is regarding allocations to staff. I'm disappointed that staff have got to jump through another hoop for approval to be sought by the Housing Director to be able to go through the process. Does that really have to be there? That paragraph, I get allocations to staff, family members of staff and elected members. Why should they have to jump through this other hoop?
I think I'll ask officers to answer that, because I've got my own answer, but it might be too brusque as an answer. So maybe officers can sugar the pill a bit.
I think it's the interest of transparency, Chairman, that there may be a perception that if staff were to get these processes without being fully transparent, there may be a perception of bias. So they would go through the same open and transparent process as everybody else.
So we've got to be not merely fair, but be seen to be fair.
Yeah, correct, Chairman. David,
how do you react to that?
It'll be on their form, won't it? Anyway, so why do we have to have a director? Sorry, I disagree. I understand what you're saying, but it's going to be on their application form that what their job and so forth, that they're related to a member, or a member of staff. But seriously, it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be there. But that's just me being a bit pickety on that. Regarding timescales, I'm concerned in a number of areas that the combined authority will set a time period for them coming up with an action, and it's in 2 places that we have this. We'll set a time period. Shouldn't that be laid down what the time period is at the beginning or on any process?
It's an interesting point raised, Councillor Ambrose Smith. What we would need to do is we would set those time periods down in the grant offer letter, not the grant offer letter, in the offer letter that goes back, because we may need to recognise individual circumstances for certain processes. So rather than try and tie our hands now as to what that time period would be, it'd be better to put it in the formal correspondence that we have back with individual applicants.
And are you also saying that then, Emma, regarding allocations for subsequent 100k home sales, at the bottom you have the combined authority will set a period of time to nominate the subsequent purchaser. So you're wrapping those both up in that, are you?
Yeah, yes, because what could be a 3 month now could knock on some, we could lose someone along the way, for example. So we don't want to tie our hands to time periods at this stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did see both Bridget and Ryan indicate quickly that they wished to speak at one point, and not Bridget, not Ryan. Thank you. Councillor Roger Hickford.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've missed it in this. We are expecting a lot of applicants, and I can imagine that actually we get quite a few applicants with the same scores, and we could easily have 15 people after 5 houses with the same scores. And I was just wondering what the process would be for that, if I may.
That's an excellent question, and it looks as though Emma has the answer.
I do. It would be order of delivery, Chairman. So all things being equal, it's the first one to get their form in. So we will then, if we get to all things being equal, it will come down to date and time of submission.
Interesting to know. Thank you. Any other members with a question? Comment? No. Well, we're being asked to approve the 100k homes allocation policy and guidance document as set out as Appendix 1, with the amendment of the salary cap being reduced from £80,000 per annum to £50,000 per annum, and with the phrases applicant that be changed in all cases to applicant who. Does anyone want me to take this to a vote, or can I accept this as being agreed unanimously? Happy to take it to a vote. All happy? Thank you very much indeed, members. That resolution is carried as amended. Moving on from that, our final agenda item 2.3, which is on pages 53 to 55 of our pack, is the Housing Medium-Term Financial Plan Review. And I believe we have John Alsop, if John's here. Yes, no. You are. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. Gilad Hussain, hi. Thank you, Chair. This committee is recommended to note the current medium-term financial plan and consider whether there are any recommendations to make to the Combined Authority Board in November. The medium-term financial plan will take us up to 2024/25. The draft is going to the board for the draft is going to the board in November for consultation. In the Appendix 1, there is the current medium-term financial plan attached, and it includes all approved costs as well as subject to approval costs. And all of these costs are affordable within the Combined Authority's current resources. So I now commend this report to the committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Gilad. Just to point out to members before anyone speaks, paragraph 2.3 does have an error within it, where reference is made in the final sentence to the Skills Committee, and that of course should be the Housing and Communities Committee. Right, members. Councillor Sargent, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chair. We've got a few columns which are empty, so can we assume that at the moment we don't expect any carryover into the later years? But my main issue I want to just raise is it looks as though we're not spending very much on the revolving fund, as we've called it, the 40 million. But as I understand it, we've still got loans out there which will be repaid at some stage. I guess it doesn't mean at the moment out of the 40 million for the revolving fund, we've got 34 million that could be loaned out. Is that right?
That doesn't sound right to me the way you've just put it, Mike. Gilor or any other officer?
Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. So, yes. So in terms of the revenue budget, that's the overall budget that was the approved. That was approved in January. So that's the current plan. In terms of the revenue allocations, that's all the allocations we have at the moment. Any budget that needs to be carried forward will be brought back for approval at the end of the financial year. The section below, in terms of the capital budget, so the two 40 million lines. The first one shows what was going to be released this financial year, and the second line shows what was going to be recycled over the next 3 years. So these are more the budgeted numbers rather than the actual numbers, and over the next 8 weeks we'll update these numbers with the current positions for approval.
So if I understand you correctly, apologies Mike for coming in, if I understand you correctly, some of these items for future expenditure are ones which have already been authorised by this committee, but the cash flow is such that the amounts won't actually be utilised until a future accounting period.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mike, does that help?
I don't think I fully understand the difference between the line which is Housing Investment Fund and the line which is Recycled Housing Fund. Both are from the 40 million.
Okay.
You can have another go at explaining the difference.
Yeah, sure. So the first line includes the original £40 million that we were given out as loans, and the money that came or is due to come back is the second line. So that's us recycling the original money, original loans.
Is that clear, Mike? Okay, may I give it a try?
Please.
We agreed £40 million for the recycling, for the recycled loans, yes? We agreed a £40 million facility.
Yeah.
In the first line, you've got the utilisation of that £40 million.
Right.
In the second line, you've got the reutilisation of some of that 40 million, because we've got some of the 40 million back and now we're using it a second time or even a third time. So the second line contains the reuse, whereas the first line is an original use. Does that make sense?
As long as we don't end up in the situation of having additional lines for the third time it's been recycled and the fourth time, etc., Chair. But thank you for that explanation. It is now clear.
That's excellent. Thank you. And it was a good question, Mike. So thank you very much indeed for it. And thank you, Gilor, as well. Are there any other members who have any comments or questions on this report? Then we're being asked, first of all, to note the report, which I'm sure we are happy to do. And we don't have any specific recommendations to make to the board about this report. No. Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, members. Next item is just a noting of the date of the next meeting, which will be the 9th of November 2020. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much indeed, members, for your presence. Thank you, members of the public and press who've stayed through this. And I wish you a very good afternoon. Thank you.
Everyone.
Cheerio, everyone.